Welcome back to class, everybody. It's a bloody sandy day in the neighborhood, and as you can see, our glorious little classroom has gotten quite the facelift. My weapon wall is a bit barren right now. Got some dusty tomes here to look at. You know, they gave me a wine jug, so it's empty though. But eventually, it'll be full of wine. Wonder if there's a mod for that. Just something you can just drink for drinking's sake. Yeah, so the classroom got a little different. Today's episode is kind of just going to be a recap of the last 2 seasons of King's Classroom. Starting with the different types of weapons and their specialties. Let me just make sure I'm standing kind of center. I don't want to smack anything. And moving on to the hows, the whys, and the wheres. Birds. Actually, I think there's been 3 seasons of King's Classroom so far. I haven't broken them down into seasons. I really need to. So we're just going to recap Season 1 today, which was like my first 3 or 4 videos, maybe 5 or so. Essentially talking about the weapon groups and what they're best at. So give me 1 minute, and I will revitalize my weapon wall. Go. Boom. Alright. So, the swords aren't quite... I don't think any of the medieval mega packs quite play tested to see how it handles the weapon rack here. So we're just going to roll on with some funky looking ready to kill swords. So I've got here a gaggle of swords that we covered in various different videos. So we're going to start with the one-handed swords here. These are kind of the all-around swords. Now this one doesn't have the greatest stabbing tip. It's definitely more of a chopping blade. But most one-handed swords that were double-sided could stab. You guys have seen me in my videos stab with this guy. Let me get a little closer. There you go. So it's not impossible to stab with him. Second on the list, we've got daggers. Daggers are meant for the stab, because I mean just look at that beautifully crafted point there. But daggers like this Lansney's dagger, which are very broad, well, they have cutting capabilities. The wider it is like that, the wider that cross section is, the more stab inclined it is. So yeah. Next we go into single-sided weapons. Single-sided weapons like this are all chop all day. You do not want to stab with this, because that is going to put a lot of pressure on the tip there, just that little tip, and you risk breaking it. But with that big meaty cleave end, you can do crap like that. I mean, ouch, right? Moving right along, a sword that's all stab all day. The cusp hilt rapier is the one I chose to be my stabby type sword. Because of the stabby type swords, it has slightly wider blade, meaning that it very much could cut if need be. You know, you've got your slices in here, your parries, and more importantly, you've got your thrusts. Come on. It's supposed to be the stabby weapon. There we go. I just wasn't lining it up properly. So yeah, this thrusting swords like this, all stab all day. Bonk. Lastly, our great swords. Great swords are an oddity in battle because a lot of them have very finely crafted tips in case you wanted to stab with it. See? But they were definitely not meant for that, and the weight and heft of the blade meant that running it into something point first could very easily bend or break it. They were meant to be held in 2 hands and to smash through groups of people. 4 or 5, people on these big, hefty swings, taking off horse heads and legs with massive chops, cracking through shields. Why do I keep crouching? I think I gotta adjust my guy's height. He's a little off. So yeah, the swords were meant to be some nasty bits of work. Moving on to axes. Thank you, Chick. All right. Axes. Less nimble and dexterous than the swords off the Brazil with you. Less nimble and dexterous than swords, but that does not mean they're not as deadly. Axes are often considered more deadly than swords, simply because they can get through armor a lot easier. And not to mention, a more inexperienced soldier can use one easier, because with a sword, you got to worry about your edge alignment, you got to worry about your cutting curve, all that kind of crap. With an axe, you just grip and swing. All you got to make sure is that pointy end. Sorry, burping. All you got to do is make sure pointy end down. And just swing it. The first one we got up here is the Archer's Axe, which I think is very aptly named because it definitely looks like a sidearm kind of weapon, which, if need be, could be flipped around. Could not be flipped around? What the hell? Huh, I guess it cannot be flipped around. That's weird. Normally axes, you can wield both sides of them, so you could spin this one around and use this blunt end here for like driving tent stakes and shit, but I guess this one just wants to be the hacky choppy. Moving right along to this bad boy, which you can turn around, because that back end boyo. Oh, so, god dang it. So this is the Carolinian, or the Orleans battle axe, not the Carolinian axe. Sorry, I'm thinking Carolinian sword. The Orleans battle axe, full metal, coated metal, handles metal, heads metal, all of it's metal, which means it is meant to see not just one battle, but many. With a wide cutting curve here, it's going to bite, and it's going to bite deep. A good spike on the top, meaning a more experienced soldier doesn't just need to swing and swing. They can get a jab or a pop in there, and that back spike means that a clever soldier could bring that back of that axe around somebody's shield, jab them, pull on that shield, and come in for the stab. It opened up a lot of options, or they could just turn it around and war pick somebody with it. So adding the second side to this axe being something other than just a mallet end. You'll note too that it's bladed on the top end, not on the bottom. So it's not like I'm going to bring it and slice somebody this way, but I could hook around the shield and drive it forward and hope to catch them with that. Hope that it would slice them kind of like a knife sticking off the back. Next up, one of the more famous throwing axes, the Francesca. So the Francesca wasn't meant for the melee, but you've all seen me use it quite well in a hack situation because, again, it's still an axe. While not as heavy as some of our other axes, so it's not going to bite as deep, that is a long head, meaning as long as this bit gets fully inside of you, it can push the rest of the way, and essentially it's now stabbing you with something that long. Or it can be thrown, which is its original intended purpose, to deal pretty good damage at a distance. That kind of damage, mind you, from a throwing axe, it's going to hit harder than some arrows, not as hard as javelins, so it's a nice happy medium. Francescas also could skip. They'd be thrown down at the ground, they'd roll on the ground and pop up under shields and hit people in the shins. Moving on, we've got the two-handed axes. Now, nothing says two-handed axe like the Dane axe. The Danes being these Nordish warriors, or not, yeah, Nordish or Norse warriors, whose battle prowess with these mighty great axes is song and fable and legend the world over. They'd grab these things, come in, and just boom, and hack through shields, boom, hack through plate, boom, hack through heads, boom, hack through whatever they needed to hack through, doors, walls, gates. And I'll admit, a two-handed axe is going to hit like a ton of bricks. You've got all that weight at the end of a very long stick, so even if I bite up to here, that's still a lot of weight way down there at the end. And that leverage alone is going to do a lot of damage, but look how long the blade is away from the handle. That means that is going through your shoulder all the way down to your lung before it finally hits wood. Now, this thing's banded horizontally instead of vertically, which, I mean, yeah, there's a good chance a sword coming down could go in between those bands and hit the wood, but not as likely. It also means that if the axe were to crack instead of be sliced, if it were to split, it can't split across a band. The band will hold it together. So it would have to split perfectly in between those. Plus, when somebody swings down at me, if I'm holding an axe like this and somebody's swinging at me and I go like this, that sword is going to skip up and click into one of those bands and be caught there. That, and if I choke way up, you know, put my hand here, I can now bash somebody with that banded metal, clip them with that handle there, and then bring the top down over. So I've got versatile options, which, you know, I love my versatility. Next, we're going on to the even larger, which is currently wedged, the Atgear, which later gave way to the pole axe. Big old blade on the end of a big old stick gave way to the bardige and to the pole axe, as I said before. Bam, man. Just like the Dane axe, but worse. Not to mention, it also has the ability to stab. Not to mention, if I do choke way up here, there's this handle right here. Now, this one, not a great handle. It's not a designated handle on the weapon. But yeah, I could grab, and then I could bash with it. I could hit with it. So, like, let's say my handle gets, you know, like the bottom of my handle gets broken. I'm here, I'm fighting, and they cut right through my handle there. Well, then I just switch my grip up to here, and now I've got essentially a short axe with a stabbing point. I can choke up even higher and get that cleaver punch. So it was a great weapon. And with a haft as thick as a freaking tree trunk, I don't think anyone's even going to be chopping through that. Not easily, anyways. Not without something like an axe. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Jake. Alright, starting off our blunt weapon showcase, we've got the most simple of all, called the shillelagh by the Irish, and the club by the rest of the world, because we're normal. You've got your cudgel. Now, hold on real quick, my nose itches. Oh, that feels so much better. So, the cudgel, or the club, is just simply a blunt instrument. Wielded this way for hits that roll off the body, and wielded the other way for ones you really want to stick. Hitting somebody with something like a club is just guaranteed to give them a ringing headache. Remember, blunt weaponry isn't typically about inflicting bleeding wounds. Some of them do. By God, do some of them do. No, typically blunt weaponry is meant to just ring somebody's bell or break somebody's bone. Next up, you can't say war pick without Nadziak. This thing's nasty on the one side, that Becta Corbin bit, but you spin this guy around, and you've got that solid mallet end. So one end is for getting through the armor, the other's for ringing someone's dome. And honestly, with its full metal body and slight little guard here, I feel pretty safe with this thing. You know? That even though the metal's twisted for stylization, I don't think somebody's going to be able to chop through that, because it's, you know, metal. Moving on, we have got our, I want to say this is the Great Mace, and it's stuck in, yeah, it's oh, Jesus. The Grand Mace. And it is stuck in the bark. There we go. Whew, Nelly. So that is a lot of flangs with a nice little tip there. Don't know how well it stabs. Stabs well enough. Yeah, it's not going to win any prizes, but it'll definitely hurt. The real thing, though, is that weight on the end, on all those little flangs there, that's going to put all that weight into a tiny surface area, which will dent the armor even better, break bones better, just apply the concussive force in a more efficient manner. Not to mention, that's a long handle to generate a lot of leverage on that force. Go ahead and get wedged back in there, buddy. Now we're going to go to a different part of the world. We're going to go to Japan for their kanabo. Now, you guys have seen the kanabo before, and it did not look like this. That's because they have got a kanasaibo, now, which we all know is the Kanabo. Alright, spawn that bad boy. Now, this is what I'd normally think of as a Kanabo, and this as a Tetsubo. But you know what? I'll let them do them. So these kinds of weapons, made in Japan, they were meant for cracking through the armor that the samurai wore without having to cut through it. You literally just bludgeon it out of the way. The smaller dimples on this one, while being heftier, definitely, meant that weight would be a bit more dispersed. So you're less likely to actually do any puncturing. But against like samurai's like ceramic kind of armor, you're definitely going to crack it. This one has pointier dimples, a lot less, and it's namely made of wood. So it would be a cheaper alternative. Even the handle seems to be of a lesser quality. But what I really like about this one, sorry, my nose. Whenever I do this, my mustache hits my my headset and causes my nose to itch. I do like that it has a spike there on the handle. There we go. So yeah, you could jab somebody with that spike if you're in close enough and you don't have the room to swing. But I could definitely see myself bringing this Kanabo with me, or like a bar mace, which functions under a similar principle, with me into the dungeons in some of the higher difficulties. Lastly, we've got the Gata, because you gotta show the Gata when you're doing all the blunt weaponry. This thing's lobed instead of flanged or knobbed. And those lobes mean that when you do hit somebody, it's going to hit and keep moving, or hit and roll off the body, allowing you to come back through for another hit. So you can essentially choke way down and just bam, 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 you know? And get those rolling punches in there. Alright, next up is ranged weaponry, or spears. Next up is spears, and I'll see you there now. The board is empty. Because they're all right here. Yeah, no, I tried sticking them into that board and did a whole cut, but I couldn't get any of them out of the board. So congratulations, you're now all scattered around me. Spears, the battlefield basic for any army. Literally what can make or break an entire army's like will to fight. This is a new one to the club, the Elephant Guandao. It is a Guandao with a elephant-sized blade. It's absolutely massive, and I can't wait to hit somebody with it, because that looks like it's going to take entire freaking body parts off with the slightest of ease. It sticks so effortlessly and then just slides through the table. So we've also got another new guy to the bunch, the Partisan. At least I think that's it, or the Partisan. Beautiful ornate tip here, kind of wide, not really the greatest intricate thrusting tip, but these hooks on the sides were actually often sharpened as well, though this spear is definitely more ceremonial than functional. It still looks great and would have some nice cuts if you got a sideways stab with it, or a sideways slice or a good stab with it. It would still do the job. But you can't even hope to talk about spears without talking about the pike. Literally what made regular combat obsolete, the Pike Phalanx, where just rows and rows of people with these stupid long-ass spears stood shoulder to shoulder, and no one could reach them, aside from like archers and musketeers and shit. Next we've got the one that changed Roman warfare, the Pilum, or Pilum. This thing, not only stupid sharp, like, I mean, look at that, it just, boop, but, trust me, you're gonna like this, you're gonna like this a lot. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you saw right, folks. Through that, and behind. That is a stupid long stabbing end, and it goes crazy deep. So yeah, something like that, especially because these were meant to be thrown, they weren't meant to be stabbed. That thing was meant to be hurled at you. And I guarantee you, when that hits you, you're going to have some reservations. Next up was the dory, the thing that Greece used to win its independence, to fight off invaders, and just in general measure dick size. Another crazy sharp one by Sujin. I mean, that goes well past the wing on it, well past its widest bell. Look at that. That's ouch. Complete with a regular pokey end and a butt spike. Decent reach, but very responsive, because the actual haft isn't that thick. Not a lot of it's incredibly heavy, and the butt spike helps kind of offset the balance of the head, meaning that I could wield a shield and still be able to jab fairly easy. Moving right along, the Mycenian Spear, the dory's grandfather, extra long, by the way. Like longer than the dory, not quite as responsive, because again the weight isn't as well canceled out by just 2 metal bands, and that is a very long bronze head there. But just like its brothers, flawlessly crazy sharp. Now this one doesn't sink as deep. It really don't, but it's still deep enough to absolutely fuck some shit up. And then lastly, the spjot, the Norse idea of a spear. Kind of a makeshift shaft, some decent wrapping here and there, but a very wide leaf tip. I don't know, I bet you're asking yourself, well, why a leaf tip instead of a pointy tip like the rest of these bad boys? Well, still works. I mean, that was fluid as fuck. Doesn't go very deep. But at the same time, it didn't have to. The spjot was also meant to be hurled, and a larger tip like that, if it did get inside your chainmail, was going to leave a much larger wound. Maybe not as deep of a wound, but a larger wound. Because you got to remember, if you kill somebody, that's one enemy soldier down. If you wound somebody, well, that's a lot of resources that they got to put into trying to save his ass. Because if they just leave him for dead, that's going to demoralize the rest of the army. You know? If they just have a, if you're wounded, you're dead policy. So, moving right along, we're going to go on to the ranged combat. Boom. Alright, we got ourselves a handful of different bows and a bag of axes. So first up is the composite bow, common in most of the Middle East, in the Persian areas. Geez, no, please. Give. Well, now I don't even want it. I'm just kidding, I do. Please give it to me. There we go. So, gonna do my best here. As you can see, I got the war darts, because I still love that you could put a war dart on something like this. Hey, that wasn't half bad. So yeah, composite bow takes a bit more of a punch to pull, but has roughly the same pull power as the English war bow. You know, because of the composite make of its materials. Next up, we got 2 bows from Japan. The Japanese short bow. Come on. Give it to me. There we go. There we go. That stuck right into the rock. Yeah, not as powerful as the composite bow, but allowed for a faster fire rate because it didn't take as much strength to pull. Then you've got the Japanese longbow, which was their bow of choice. Can I not even... Oh, Jesus. Where am I now? Sweet mother. Give me the bow. Give me the bow. Come on. I don't know what's going on right now. I just want the bow. Give me the bow. I almost got it. Come on. Give it to me. Give me the bow. See, this is what happened last time. You know what? Fuck you. I don't need you. I don't need this shit. I could just go over here. And I can spawn you in, because you're not special. Actually, you're very special. You had a very unique design to you where I'm holding it very asymmetrically. And yet you generate an insane amount of power. Like, absolutely insane. So you're actually very creative and inventive, and I love you. The war bow disappeared, the one that I like the most. This is the... I think it's the longbow. Like your standard... Yeah, I'd say it's about the size of your standard Germanic longbow. These things could fire with about 80, 90 pounds of pull. And then some all the way up to 200. They were incredibly dangerous, incredibly deadly, and are the sole thing responsible for a lot of battlefield casualties. This is why in most Germanic and English fights everybody has a fucking shield, because of that bad boy right there. Next we've got our... Oh, you're on the ground. No, you're a different one. Get out of my face. Next we've got our throwing axes. I went with these over the Francesca just because they're a little smaller, a little easier to throw. And the fact that they're smaller means that while they're less useful in the melee, their good curve means that they'd actually be useful for climbing axes. Oh, I hit my own. As you can see in the shadows, I've got some on my pockets. Again, I've got these war darts here. Kind of difficult to throw, if I'm being entirely honest with you. But, you know, I manage. On my other hip, I've got the shuriken. Oh, that was terrible. See, I've got those. On this shoulder, I've got javelins for throwing, but also for stabbing. So the javelin's multi-tool capabilities meant that it was a really useful weapon. And, while not as sharp as the dory, definitely can punch right through with its piercing capabilities. At least in this game it can. And then on my other shoulder, I probably should have been shooting these out of the bows. The bodkin arrow, my personal favorite arrow. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come over here. Which of you wants to work with me today? I'm going to go this way, because I think you gave me the least MacGuffin. Yes, I will do that. No. Dummy. So yeah, bows were incredibly useful in combat. They can punch through armor fairly well. They can drop targets who are approaching, especially chargers. They can help defend a castle keep. It's hard to climb up a ladder and hold a shield up at the same time, you know. It's hard to push siege engines with one hand. So bows definitely made or broke medieval warfare over most of the planet, really. So that kind of does it. Next, I would normally go into shields. I'm going to go ahead and skip shields for this recap. Got some weird rarities here that I'm not even going to bother with. I've got a few tool toys here. Not going to bother with. The Japanese weaponry, just variants. I've included a few of them, left out a few of them. Same with the Chinese weapons, the Norse weapons, the Greco, the African, the Indo-Egyptian. And then all these modern motherfuckers I ain't even going to get into today. So yeah, that does it for the Season 1 recap. Just a very short, quick recap. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments, and I'll remake the entire video. I am not kidding. If I missed anything, any weapon category, let me know. Let me know, and I'll redo this entire video, and I will mention you by name. I'll put your fucking name right there. I'll put it right there, and I'll be like, this guy's the man. This guy, this girl, the man. I don't know. You know, they're the savior of this video. They let me know what I missed. Here it is. Let's roll on through. So, yeah, because this is supposed to be a comprehensive recap. So if I missed anything, let me know in the comments. Class dismissed.